Hello, everyone. I'm Jenna Paone. Welcome to Lit Chick on a Mighty Blaze. I'm so thrilled to welcome Amy E. Reichert today to join us to celebrate her latest book, The Kindred Spirits Supper Club. So cute. It's such a cute title. Welcome, Amy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Jenna. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. You were just like a ray of sunshine, which I was saying I'm not at all surprised because your books are like little rays of sunshine. And like, I'm like, it's so nice when the person you meet is like, I really get it now. Like I have a whole new love for your books now that I'm meeting you because you just are that embodiment of like.
Thank you. I imagine my family has a very different opinion, especially when I'm on deadline. But I appreciate that at least that part comes across to the world.
Yeah, at least you're projecting it. Let's start by just introducing you to the world as though I'm sure people know you, but we're going to give your bio and then we will dive right into some questions. So Amy E. Reichert, author of The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, Luck, Love, and Lemon Pie, The Simplicity of Cider, The Optimist's Guide to Letting Go, and The Kindred Spirits Supper Club, loves to write stories that end well with characters you'd invite to dinner, which is my favorite bio line ever. Like, I think that's so accurate. Like, I just love it. Her fiction is always food forward, full of heart, and always set in her home state of Wisconsin. Consistently described as warm, witty, clever, and delicious, her books are about everyday women with everyday problems, and readers can't get enough. A wife, mom, amateur chef, fix-it mistress, volunteer baby snuggler, and cider enthusiast, she earned her MA in English literature and serves on her library's board of directors. She is a member of Tall Poppy Writers. Amy's latest book, The Kindred Spirits Supper Club, was named a must-read for spring by BuzzFeed, Bustle, Book Tribe, Pop Sugar, Book Riot, and Midwest Living. In a starred review, Booklist calls The Kindred Spirits Supper Club a charming rom-com with a supernatural twist, filled with a strong sense of place, mouth-watering descriptions of food, and a sweet love story or two. Reichert's latest will surely delight readers. And New York Times bestselling author Emily Henry says the Kindred Spirits Supper Club, with the Kindred Spirits Supper Club, Amy E. Reichert has created a heart-squeezing love story with a perfect sprinkling of mystery and magic, a deliciously sweet tale about ghosts, growing up, and going home. Amy, welcome and congratulations again.
Thank you. You make me sound so fabulous.
You know what? I think every interview should start off with a lot of praise because it is really hard to write a book. It is hard to write multiple books. And you know what? It's especially hard to publish a book during these crazy times where book tours are so, you don't get I saw a great tweet this morning was like writing a book is just like trying to solve the problems that you created for 2 years and then you get some cake. And like, we don't get the cake right now. So we need the cake.
This is the cake.
Yeah, this is the cake.
I miss the cake. I miss it so much. I had one tiny little in-person signing event that was actually it was announcing one of the fall conferences that I'm going to be at.
Yep.
It was the most amazing thing to be around other writers and to meet readers.
Yep. Oh, we miss it so much. It's a pleasure to talk to author. I do feel like the great thing is we get to have these really in-depth discussions with our authors. So let's get started let's kick it off by, can you tell us, a little bit more about the Kindred Spirits Supper Club? We never do spoilers here, but give us a little rundown on what it's about. And then we'll talk a little bit about what inspired you to write it.
Okay. So the Kindred Spirits Supper Club is about Sabrina Monroe. She is a failed journalist, just got fired from her 5th job. And of course, the worst thing happens. She has to move back home to the Wisconsin Dells with her parents into her house. And not only is it demoralizing after getting fired so many times, but moving back home is tough for her. She has social anxiety. A lot of it comes from her family's secret, which is that they can see ghosts, and the women in her family help ghosts move on to wherever you go later. Yep. And growing up, she was kind of the weird kid in town, and she got bullied a lot, and this did not go well. So it's hard for her to make connections.
Yeah.
So now that she's back home, she's experiencing all of this again. And the one upside is her best friend lives there. Her best friend happens to be a ghost they've never been able to help. Ghost Molly, who is probably one of my favorite characters I've ever
She's amazing. I love Molly so much. I kind of want to be like, if this were a movie, I'd want to play Molly.
I'd allow it. You'd have to dye your hair blonde.
Perfect. I've always wanted to be blonde.
And Molly they were never able to help her. She never got her happy ever after. Fun fact about Molly is she's obsessed with rom-coms. She and Sabrina have watched them their whole lives. Well, Sabrina's whole life.
Yep.
And Molly really wants Sabrina to have the happy ever after that she never got. So when there's this new supper club owner in town, Molly kind of nudges Sabrina in that way. And this new supper club owner, Ray, he is from New York, but he's fallen in love with the area of Wisconsin. He loves the food. He loves the people. He loves the small town. He loves the community. And he's really intrigued by this kind of quirky woman he observes at a water park who does these little acts of kindness when no one's watching, like picks up towels out of a wet puddle. And so he's intrigued. So he starts trying to get to know her a little bit more. And she, being who she is, isn't very receptive to it. But Molly kind of nudges them along. And some things happen, and they're forced to work together for a little bit. And some mysteries about the past intermingle. So it was a lot of fun to write.
I mean, you can tell how much fun you had with this book. And this is, so, you often have kind of like an element of coincidence or fate or, something happened. I mean, like starting, like you tend to have like the universe kind of pushing people together, but this is an interesting, like you really leaned into the magic in this book. Can you talk about like kind of what drew you to that and why this was, why you decided to do this now?
So for me, my favorite kind of stories take the real world and then give it a twist.
Yeah.
So I love Sarah Addison Allen's books.
I love Sarah Addison Allen so much. She's so good. She's writing a new one and I'm like, let's get it.
Yeah. I gotta write that down.
I know. We gotta get it. Sarah, if you're watching, we want the book.
Get me. I love her writing The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Mm-hmm. So these things that just have a little twist. And I love that. So I did a little bit of it in one of my previous books, The Simplicity of Cider, but I really kind of wanted to step into this magical realism. This one's a little bit more paranormal because it's technically ghosts. Yeah. But it's not creepy ghosts.
It's not. It's very charming. It's very sweet.
Yeah. I feel like they need to put a big disclaimer on the front. Not creepy.
Yeah.
Ghosts, if there's such a thing. I wanted to lean into that. And when I was in the Wisconsin Dells doing research for the book, I was kind of poking around looking for some local lore that I could work into the story. And right on Main Street is this place called Ghost Molly's Showboat Saloon. And there was, at least at the time, there wasn't a lot of information about who Ghost Molly was and what her haunting was like. She just, the rumor mill, the ghost sites just said that she had died in the apartment above. She'd slam doors, turn on lights, cold air, that kind of stuff, the typical haunting things. But there wasn't a lot known about her. They think she died in like 1930.
Okay.
So I'm like, she needs a story.
Yeah.
I built that into the story. And this book came together in so many different pieces. So I knew I wanted in the Dells. I knew I wanted Sabrina to be a duck driver. I knew I wanted Ray to be a supper club owner. And the anxiety came into the picture when I brought on this ghost element, because I was thinking, what would it be like if you were the kid in school who all of a sudden a ghost popped up in front of you? What would that do? And what would people think of you? Because they don't know what's going on and you can't tell them.
Yeah.
So then the social anxiety kind of built from there.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting element to write, because I was drawing on, I have anxiety to a much lesser extent.
Don't we all?
But then you put in the pandemic as I'm editing. It was more editing phase when I was doing this. That really added a lot. But I do have people in my life who do have anxiety, and I've seen people with panic attacks. And so it's something that I really wanted. It was important for me that this character, I'm totally gotten off topic from where we started.
That's okay. That's all right. I love it. No, this is so great, because what I love about your books is your characters really are dealing with things that, everyone does experience at some point. And it might not seem like, it's great because it's real things that people are really dealing with when they read your books, and it's like, oh, there are ways to get, help. There are ways to recover and move on and things like that, and kind of make your life better. But that's really hard. And for a lot of us now, especially after the pandemic, I mean, we're all focusing a little more on our mental health, right? It's like, it's really tough. And that's such a great message that, you're reading this happy, fun book, and you really are watching this character's, journey. But of course, if you had ghosts that you could see, like I might have a bit more anxiety myself.
But isn't that kind of, if you think about like mental health issues, that's kind of what experiencing them is like, is you have this invisible thing that no one else can see that makes your life so much more complicated. Yeah. And that whole analogy just occurred to me right now.
Yeah. That's true. That's brilliant. I think you should use that forever. That was your original intent.
That's right.
But it was like, that's the thing. That's the magic of writing, right? Is somewhere in your subconscious was that idea, and it took you until now to be able to articulate,
find the words about it. Well, and it was really important to me to show that it's not like Sabrina falls in love and all of her problems go away,
right?
Or that something changed about her anxiety. It didn't. It's just like, one of the things that was really important to me was to show Ray looking at her and seeing what she needed and adjusting how he interacted with her.
Yeah.
So that it better met what she needed. Because I think that's really what the world needs more of, damn it.
I love it. I mean, and let's talk about that, because one of the best things, what I love to see now, which I'm so thrilled that it seems like every rom-com I read now, like, I'm so thrilled at the portrayals of love. I really, and I know you've been doing this since your first book. Like, I love that we have healthy relationships on the page, and not, in this world, like, Carrie would never end up with Mr. Big, like that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it would never, even though I was secretly happy that happened because I wanted it to happen. But at the same time, when you look back at it, you're like, oh yeah, this was a terrible thing. And that seems to be really important to you as a writer, to portray healthy relationships. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how you do you consciously think about how you want to portray, romantic love on the page in a way that is positive and healthy?
That's a really great question. And I don't know if I've ever thought of it in that perspective. I guess for me, we've all had really crappy relationships.
Yeah.
And like, I've had characters in my book who've had really crappy ex relationships.
Yeah.
And it always amuses me when readers are like, well, why was she ever with him? Well, haven't you ever made a bad choice?
Yeah.
You learn. But I think it is important. I guess I'm going to back up a little further. When I first started in this industry, and I was looking, and I was dipping my toe into the romance world. I'd always been in the romance world as a reader, but as a writer, hearing other romance writers talk about reader reactions and how, I'll never forget one author, and I don't remember who it was, but she was talking about how the most touching thing she'd ever heard from a reader is that when she read the romances that this author wrote, she finally knew what it was like to be treated well and be in a healthy relationship. And that meant a lot to me. Like, this was a place to go, because her life, she wasn't in that.
Yeah.
Maybe she eventually got the courage to get out of it or not, but at least it was a reprieve from what she was experiencing. And she knew that what she had in real life wasn't right.
Yeah.
So maybe I put that at heart.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, you need to be in a healthy relationship where you talk about your problems and you're respectful of one another. And I don't think I consciously do that, but I think that that's definitely the path I want. I want to show healthy relationships. I want to show something aspirational for the reader.
Yep. I love that. And on that note, so, you in Kindred Spirits Supper Club, which you do before, we have Sabrina's point of view and we have Ray's point of view. And you often show us that both sides of the romantic couple, their points of view and how they interact, and they each have their own problems. So in doing that, Did you come up with, it sounds like you came up with Sabrina first and then you possibly came up with Ray as a counterpart. Do you think about the couple holistically from the beginning, or does one person in the couple tend to pop into your head first? And how was it in this case?
So I know there's going to be another person. Yeah. Sabrina was definitely the first one. Ray came next. But as far as their characters and the holistic relationship, I gotta be honest, that doesn't show up until like draft 2 or 3. This like blank-faced, even both of them were kind of blank-faced as far as characters. So it's really not until I get into that second and third draft that their character starts to take form. And I'm in the middle of draft, like editing an early draft of my next book. And so it's the same thing. And it's so frustrating because you'll get there eventually, but gosh, all those little edits and little things are just painful sometimes. So it takes shape slowly, but Sabrina probably came first. And I knew when I was creating Ray, I really wanted to create like the guy that got her. Yeah. And I did get some feedback from early readers. He's too nice. He's too good. He doesn't have much of a story arc. I'm like, you know what? I think it's okay. The guy, I mean, he's got his stuff that he's working through over there. Why can't he just be good to her? And I think that's okay. So that they sort of evolved to the drafts. I think that answered your question.
Yeah, no. So that's interesting. So now that leads me, like, now I have a million questions about your process then, because so are you an underwriter or an overwriter? Are you somebody who needs to like build it and add, or do you need to take away in order to get that?
I am an underwriter, like hard underwriter. I like to get all my big spots in position, and until I can get all those big things working right, it's really hard for me to dig into scene descriptions and character, like really build out all the flesh. So like right now, for instance, technically I'm on probably my 3rd draft of it, but I haven't actually finished the last few chapters. I know what's going to happen there. But I don't want to write that yet.
Gotcha.
And it's still a really short draft. I'm still right around 65K because right now I figured out I need to take out some subplots. Because I tend to throw everything in.
Gotcha.
Take those out. They're all very short. And then now that I'm pretty confident on the main, like how it's all going to work, and the main subplots and the main thread, now I'll start flushing things out a little bit more.
Cool.
And so by the time I turn this draft in, it'll probably be 75, 80. But it'll be like the 3rd or 4th draft. But I'm definitely an underwriter. And I think that comes because I used to be a technical writer. So it was all about
the bolts.
Quick, efficient. How do you say the least amount of words? And I hate deleting. I hate it. Like to work take it away. That's just horrible.
I love it. Amy, you and I are like polar opposites, because I'm struggling to my first drafts are like 400,000 words, and I'm like, nobody needs to say this much about anything, but I'm like, I better describe this person in the restaurant, this person in the restaurant who we're never gonna meet. I need to get some of your underwriter so do you find your plot focused then when you do that first draft? Is it touch points of plot, or is it like overall story?
It's definitely plot. Like one of the first things I do, and I don't really have anything around me right now. But I'm a real big fan of Cam Whelan's structuring your novel. So I will do the tent poles. I'll go, this is the first plot point, this is the midpoint, blah, 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 blah. I know those big pieces, and then I kind of scribble in some motivations. And so I think the difference between what you and I do is, whereas you put everything into that draft, I just create lots of random little sheets over here that have all that extraneous information.
Oh, I love it. I love seeing people's notes. Give me all the notes. Give me your index cards. Like, I love this.
I even have a map for this one.
That's great. I was going to ask you, I mean, like, obviously sense of place. Let's talk about place for a little bit, because obviously, you know, you're inspired by Wisconsin, which I think is, I love this. I mean, I'm a writer who's working on, like, I specifically decided I wanted to write books. I've been in the music industry for many years, and I decided to switch and write books because I really wanted to tell stories about New England. Like, that's really like, and that like came to me like as a deep, like, this is like, feels like a soul mission. And it seems like telling stories about Wisconsin is like deeply meaningful to you and deep in your soul. Can you talk about like how you came to that discovery and what you love about Wisconsin, what you love about your home?
I can. So when I was writing my first book, The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, it all started as way back in your days of like 2010.
Yeah.
I was going to do NaNoWriMo. And when I was coming up with the idea, a couple different things fell into place. One, the whole idea of write what you know, which I took to mean as I'm learning how to write a book, so I don't want to have to do a lot of research on the other stuff. So that's why Lou is a chef, because I've spent a lot of time in restaurants and kitchens, and I felt like I could write that authentically pretty well.
Yeah.
And then I knew I wanted a romance. Who's the hardest person for a chef to fall in love with? Well, a restaurant critic. Okay, so there's my protagonist and my
point. Yeah.
Two people.
Yeah.
And then the next very clear thing was I wanted it in Milwaukee. Because I feel like as a Midwesterner, we often get overlooked.
Yeah.
We are flyover country.
Yeah.
And people kind of just think there's New York, all right, Chicago in the middle, and then LA.
Yeah.
And I mean, I get it. It's really empty and it takes a long time to drive everywhere. And there's a lot of corn and cows.
Yeah.
But I love our state. I grew up here. I think we have, and I find this, and I found this through my love of food and travel, is that every part of the world, I mean, even parts of the state have different food traditions.
Yeah.
And I think that stems from where the immigrants came from. It stems from their history. So that really becomes a founding part of what I wanted to share, because I think Wisconsin has a lot of really fun food traditions beyond beer and brats and cheese, which are wonderful food traditions. And I just love our place. There's fun things to see. This is like when they're like California's burning and Florida's getting hit by hurricanes. Fine, we get some cold and snow. It's not awful. We have weather. We have 4 seasons. We have a great sports scene. Milwaukee especially is such a fun city in the summer because we have ethnic fests every single weekend, from Mexican Fiesta, Festa Italiana. We have Summerfest, which is the world's largest music festival. We have State Fair. I mean, so we have all these wonderful things. So plus the people are good. We're very polite and we'll make you a casserole and bring it when you move in.
I love it. I mean, I have to say, like, I got interested in Milwaukee because of your books. I was like, this sounds cool. And my husband and I, we're from Massachusetts, but we lived in LA for a while, and we did the drive back across the country when we moved home. And I have to say, like, we loved that area of the Midwest. Like, we loved, Minnesota, Wisconsin, like we'd, been to Illinois and Michigan a lot, Chicago and things like that. But we had some of the best food. We had like such a good time. It really, they are like thriving cities, and it's very cool. I do recommend. I recommend a trip. It's such a fun place to go, and it's
and as someone who may be in the housing market soon, houses are a whole lot cheaper here, even in this booming market.
Yep. The quality of life. I know it's so nice. And it is really nice one of the reasons I read books is to learn about new places.
Me too.
and like that I didn't know before. And like I admit that I like didn't know too much about Wisconsin. I feel like I kind of am getting to know stuff about Wisconsin. Like and actually last week we had Christy Clancy on, and her book is also set in Wisconsin, shoulder season. And like I was like, this is Wisconsin, like Wisconsin, it's hot Midwest summer. It's Midwest summer. Like
Hot Midwest summer.
like that's what we're doing. I love it. It's
yes. Oh, and shoulder season is on the top of my list. I just haven't had time. But Christina's book. Yeah, that's and that place is where she wrote about is like 45 minutes from me.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some crazy stuff that happened.
And you have so many cool things. Like I did not know that the duck tours originated in Wisconsin. I did not know. I admit it. I'm a Northeastern Bostonian, like thinks that we started everything and we invented America. And like, I was like,
invent America.
I was like 1,000% convinced that the duck tours started in Boston, because we use them every time, we use the duck boats every time we win a championship, which is often, probably a little less now, but I was like, oh, dang, I actually looked it up in reading your book, and I was like, wow, the duck tours originated there. And the supper club, let's talk about the supper clubs, because I want to get into food for a minute, because you and I share a love of food. But talk to me about the supper clubs, because this is such a unique and cool phenomenon. I thought that a supper club was just like a fancy name for a restaurant, or like an underground, like Instagram, thing that like we have our supper club on Sunday night. And I've always loved the idea of it. But talk to me about what these supper clubs are, what they were, and how that works into your book.
So first of all, there is a map behind me, which is the supper clubs in Wisconsin. And once upon a time, supper clubs were not just a Wisconsin thing. They were much more spread, more in like the 30s and the 40s. It was, and they range, like all restaurants, they range anywhere from fine dining to something just above casual family restaurant. In the tradition as it's evolved, because it started in lots of different places, like a dancing club. There's theories that it started during Prohibition, because you'd be a club member and that's where you could go to drink. And in Wisconsin, we didn't really want to give up our booze.
Mm-hmm.
Liked it a lot. But in modern era, a supper club they tend to not be in cities, especially traditional, like the ones that have been around for a while. They tend to be family owned. So it's a place where you would drive out because you're going for a night out. This is not about a quick bite to eat before you head back home and do homework or take the kid to the basketball game. You're going to be there for 2 to 5 hours, depending on how you like to do your night. A good night in a supper club, you go in, you go to the bar beforehand, you have a brandy old fashioned, could be sweet, could be sour. Wisconsin style brandy old fashions are different than how the rest of the world does them.
Yep.
Because we add soda, recipes in the book.
Yep.
Super drinkable. And my mom just gave me a recipe on how to make them into a slush. So that's going to be something I'll be trying. Because that sounds amazing.
That sounds like something that needs to happen right now.
Basically, she handed it to me and said, I would like this. Please make this.
That's what happens.
So you sit there, you might have a couple brandy old fashions, and then you'd eventually go to your table. A really common thing you're going to see at a supper club is something they call the Relish Tray. And the Relish Tray could be anything from just a basket of like crackers and those little breadsticks that are wrapped in cellophane and butter, to you could have like port wine cheese spread. You could actually have a tray that has cut up vegetables on it. Like back in the day, you'd get all of it.
Yes.
A lot of supper clubs even have like a salad bar that you then go to. And you see things like hot bacon dressing.
Yes.
And German potato salad, which if you're not familiar is more vinegar based and it's hot. I'll eat that. I will not.
I love a warm potato salad, preferably with the bacon, like a vinegar with bacon.
So good. Like I'm a mayonnaise person. I think mayonnaise is.
I'm not a mayonnaise person either. I hate mayo, but I actually don't mind it, but I hate the concept of it. Like I don't mind the taste, but the concept is it bothers me so much. Like eggs in a jar. I can't, like, if it's already in something, I'll eat it and I'll pretend it's not in there, but I like can't bring myself to like actually put mayonnaise on a piece of bread. Like I can never do it. Oh.
So I'm the exact opposite. I have no problem with the concept. Eggs and oil, not a problem. I can do that. I like both of those things. But now you put that slimy, cold substance onto like a sandwich, and your lettuce is going to slide. So it's just, and then like egg salad sandwiches are just from the depth. Like I love eggs, but there's something about a hard-boiled egg, and then you put it with
you know what? I'm so with you, but like also I like the taste of it. Like I will eat it if I pretend that like it's not what it's just the concept of it. I'm like, I love eggs. I love this. Like, but like as long as it's not, as long as like I make crab cakes and like I hate. Like it's my least, I love crab cakes. It's my least favorite thing to make because it requires mayonnaise and raw crab, two things that absolutely disgust me. So I have, and like requires like you dipping them in the egg and then like I have to like work myself into like the place where I can make crab cake.
So you just need to do some more drinking when you do that. That's all.
Speaking of, so we're on food now. We've
just gone off the rails.
We've gone on to like, I love it. This interview is getting derailed left and right because we're just having a great time. But like, let's talk about like food is so important to you. Sorry, continue with the supper clubs, and then let's seg into food is so important to you, and like let's talk about food in your books.
So back to supper clubs. Traditional menus are they look a lot like. There's steakhouse kind of, you have grilled steak, but you'll also have prime rib is a big thing. A thing in Wisconsin is broasted chicken, which is chicken that's fried under pressure. So it's basically a pressure cooker filled with oil.
That sounds amazing.
And it's very crispy, and it was invented in Wisconsin. There's a whole thing. So roasted chicken is really common. And so you just have your lovely meal. Desserts are almost always homemade. Your waitress is probably got a scratchy voice from smoking cigarettes too long.
Love it.
They're just places that even if you're a complete stranger, they're going to treat you like family. And then oftentimes, when you're done, you might even go back to the bar for a drink or two, especially an ice cream drink. So I'm apologizing to all the bartenders in Wisconsin who are now making more ice cream drinks than they used to because of me. Oh my God. If you don't like, the pink Squirrel is probably my favorite. It's in the book. It's an almond liqueur that's called creme de noyau, and then creme de cacao and ice cream. It's pink and it's yummy and it's delicious.
Yep. That sounds amazing. I want to go. We're all coming to your supper club. Like,
and there's a ton in Wisconsin, and everyone kind of has its own little vibe. That's the fun part about them. Is some of them are really fancy, and some of them are very, go in your flip flops and your khaki shorts.
Yep.
So they're just supper clubs are the best.
I love it. So, I mean, obviously like food is hugely important to you and to me. I mean, I mostly read, like if a book doesn't have food in it, I'm probably not staying that interested in it that long. Like even if I like the story, I'm like, where's the food? What are we eating and what are we wearing? Like I need to like know these things, which I also love. You have such great fashion in your book, particularly like just like Molly the ghost is like, she has her fashion. She is like, I love her outfits. It's so fun. You never know what Molly's going to be wearing. And it's one of the delights of your book is reading and seeing that. But what kind of role does food play in your life? You said you had worked in kitchens and in restaurants. Can you talk about, your past, your history with food and like why it's so inspiring to you, why you include it so much in your books?
So my first job was as a dishwasher at like a little greasy spoon place. And so I worked at restaurants from the time I was 14 until I almost got married. I got married young, so like 23, all the way through college. But so I'm very familiar with the kitchen. And I also grew up in a family where my mom, everything was homemade. It was Christmas, everything was from scratch. And even more so with my grandmothers. My grandmothers were both amazing cooks, and everything they put on the table was fantastic. And so I come from this tradition where homemade food is an act of love.
Yep.
You go to my family reunion, if you happen to stumble in.
If I'm invited to your family reunion.
Everything is homemade. The bread rolls that people eat with the smoked fish that my cousins caught and smoked themselves. I mean, it's all homemade. It's all
I want to come to your family reunion now, please.
I haven't been in many years, and I probably should go. So that idea of food is love is kind of central to who I am. And when I became an adult, I just wanted to learn more about good food and how to cook it. And I was really fascinated by that. And it's evolved over the years. I spent a lot of time reading Cooks Illustrated and Cook Country. And when my kids were babies, that was when the Food Network actually had cooking shows on. So I would watch a lot of Emeril and Rachel Ray, and
that's actually how I kind of learned to cook was watching. I mean, other than from my mom, who's also an amazing cook, and vice versa. But like, yeah, that's how I like kind of expanded my cooking repertoire, was watching Food Network like back in the day.
Back in the day when they actually it wasn't just a giant food competition.
Yeah.
I hate food competition shows, but I love cooking shows. Like I can watch the Barefoot Contessa all day long.
Oh my God, this seems like a good time to like confess that like I always have. So like I always have like at least 100 episodes of the Barefoot Contessa saved on my DVR, and they just save. Like I never delete them. I just keep them because like at some point I'm like, I guess we should buy them. Like I guess I should buy the episodes. But like my husband, like I always say he's like the Jeffrey to my Ina, and like my husband loves her too. And like our goal is to meet Jeffrey and Ina someday.
I think that's a very, very good goal.
My husband's part of a business group that actually like that Jeffrey Garten is part of. And we're like, I'm like, someday. Like it'll never happen because I'm sure he doesn't go to the events. But like,
so the one time I was in the Hamptons, I was on Ina Watch, like on a swivel.
Yeah, she's like one of like I'm not I'm not a normal celebrity person. Like my celebrities are so specific, and like Ina is like my celebrity of like all time.
Yes, Ina would be up there, and I have to admit, I told Jenna earlier that I'm going to Boston later this summer. Yeah. I'm going to admit I'm going to be on the lookout for Chris Evans. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, they're like filming. They're totally filming like right now. So like you probably will see them. And like who else is filming? Like Will Ferrell is filming with Ryan Reynolds, I think, right now. And like Boston's not that big. You'll probably see them. I mean, you'll see the film crews. Like
we'll be besties by the time we leave.
Yeah, totally. Like,
so that works.
Absolutely.
All right.
I love it. Yeah. So that's so great. So you learned. So then when you started writing, it seems like food was obviously your first book revolved around food, and like that was just a natural fit, but you've kept it going.
I have kept it going because I found that I love using food in books because I think that as humans, everyone has to eat.
Yeah.
So it's a relatable thing. You know, what are your people eating? Because that's going to tell you a whole lot about where they live and who they are. And when you eat, you know, for celebrations, for sadness, that also tells you so much about your characters. So as a storytelling device, I think food is one of the best out there because not only can it serve so many purposes, but now you get to play into all the senses. And food is such a memory trigger that it will bring back, you know, whatever memory flashback you want to bring your character into. So it's just a really, really useful tool as a writer to work in. And plus, who doesn't love a book with a recipe in it?
I love it. Oh, we have such a good question from Sylvia that just popped up that she said, Amy, what would your dream trip restaurant visit be?
Oh,
that's a good question. That is a really good one.
Okay.
Or like city. Like I'm going to add, it could be food city or food place. Like if you're like, oh, I'm thinking of like a restaurant, but I can't like think of the exact name of it. Like,
so as much as I love like fine dining and fancy food, my real heart is in like good food truck. Like that's because that's the first thing I find out when I go to a city is what are you supposed to eat?
Yep.
And that is so like when we go to Boston, lobster roll, Boston cream pie, cannoli, Italian plate. And there's
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what I want is so from that perspective, I know that in Singapore they have this amazing food court where you can get it's in the movie Crazy Rich Asians.
Yes.
And like this stall has the best noodles and this stall has the best something else. I mean, I want to go there with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yep.
And I want them to give me all the best. And just eat all the things. I don't want to know what it is.
Yep.
Because if I know what it is, I might get all squidgy about it and get it in my head. I just want to taste it.
I love that. That's a great, that's so good. And especially with somebody who knows what, like, what to direct you. Like, so your food that you feature in your books, what do you think is, have you like learned recipe? Like, do you pull recipes specifically from your repertoire, or do you ever go out and you're like, I need a really good, like, recipe that would represent this and like has that exposed, and if you do you like cook it, do you make it at home, do you like how do you figure it out?
So a little of everything. So like in my early books with the coconut cake and the lemon pie, when I knew I was going to incorporate those in, I knew I wanted a recipe that was going to be the recipe. So I did a lot of experimenting with different recipes and kind of cobbled together my own, what I wanted that to be. With the simplicity of cider, I mean, I didn't make cider. I just drank a lot of it. But in the book, there is a caramel apple bread pudding recipe, and that I kind of cobbled together as well. I did, and then I'm just going through my books. Optimist Guide to Letting Go, my main character has a gourmet grilled cheese food truck. And I did make a couple of the ones that she made. Like there was a barbecue pork cheese one that I did experiment with. And I did a couple others that I can't think of right now. But I did not include any recipes in that book because I felt like if you couldn't make a grilled cheese, I can't help you. So you're on your own. You start someplace else. But there are other recipes that show up, and sometimes I create them and play with them. Like in the Kindred Spirits Supper Club, there is Ray is experimenting with foods that he considers Wisconsin cuisine, and he kind of comes up with a beer cheese risotto and brats. And not recently, but once upon a time, I did kind of fiddle with that recipe, and it was good. It needed more work, so I have not revisited that. But I have played with some ideas. Other times, I just make stuff up, or it's something that I experienced someplace else. Like I know in The Coincidence of Coconut Cake, the chef Lou creates a deconstructed version of Saule Meunier. Which I did not do. I've never seen done. I just might be awful. But I invented that.
I mean, it always sounds delicious, and like that, like that's the thing, right? Is like if the food sounds delicious, that's the joy of reading about it. Which I don't know what it is about reading about food that's almost as satisfying as eating food, but there is something about reading and watching food that is like, I don't know, maybe it's just I'm just food obsessed. I definitely am food obsessed. I'm like, what am I eating for dinner? Like all the time. I'm like, what am I eating next? And like,
I love it when it takes me to places where it's showing me food cultures that I'm not familiar with. Like one of my favorite things about Sonali Dave's books is she really explores Indian food, and it's just part of their daily life. But give me all of the samosas and the biryanis and all of those yummy things.
1,000%. Oh, so good. Let's switch gears a little bit. I mean, you are just so like lovely and bubbly. And I know, and we have a question in here from Bozena that kind of is, I was going to ask a similar question, but the Kindred Spirits Supper Club is a happy ending book. Your books are happy ending books, and you specifically talk about in the Kindred Spirits Supper Club, like the importance of happy endings and this idea of like positivity. And you are so lovely and positive, clearly. Bozania phrased it, what is it that lets you stay so positive and optimistic? And where does your energy come from with like good ghosts and this idea of like, bringing the fun? And, I guess what draws you to the happy end? Like what makes you choose Happily Ever After to write about?
So I will start with that last one, and maybe the rest will come as I'm talking. For me, when I personally read, I read to escape, and I want to read things that end well, because I don't like a story where people are depressed at the end. I'm with you. I can appreciate literary fiction for what it is. But I try and read a couple every year because I think that's just important to read widely. But I don't like that. That's not a good time to me. I did my master's degree. I read all the dead white guys.
That's the quote of the day. I did my master's degree. I read all the dead white guys.
I'm good. And
Ditto.
in fact, it wasn't until after I earned my master's degree that I really, truly, I mean, I'd always read like Sweet Valley High and that kind of stuff when I was younger. But I picked up my first historical romance, my first romance book at a garage sale after I got my degree. And it was The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, which is, I'm so loving that it's having its moment right now.
Yep.
And then I was just down that rabbit hole and never came back, because I love taking the journey knowing that at the end, good things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I really also love science fiction and fantasy, and that can get a little darker and edgier. I mean, I love Game of Thrones, and I read the books. Please, God, let him finish them. But those don't end well. But I find myself when I'm reading that kind of story, I'm not relaxed. I'm tensed up. I'm anticipating something awful happening. So I like to ease into, I like the comfort of knowing it's going to end well.
Yeah.
And I can just enjoy that journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where it comes from. And I don't know where the optimism comes from. I think it's just, I put into my work what I want the world to be like. Because I guess at the end of the day, I believe people are pretty good, despite things sometimes out in the world. And I think that people want to be good, and yeah.
I love that. I mean, I think it's important to note that your books are not, without problems or tragedy or loss. I mean, the whole concept of this book, like, we're dealing with people that have unfinished business, as they cross over into the next life. And, that's something that it's really, we are living in like weird, strange times. And I am the same as you, where I choose, this is why I love these books, because they're happy. They're an escape from my life. My life has enough problems in it as it is, I don't want my entertainment to also be stressful. Like, I'm stressed enough. I got enough stress.
Agreed.
And I love that, like, it seemed, one of the things that it's always so interesting to me, because I consider this literature to be very feminist and to be very, and I meet an author like you, and so many of the authors that I've spoken to, during my Lit Chick interviews, and obviously they're called Lit Chick for a reason, like, we're kind of being subversive about the title and everything like that. But, you're just kind of like the embodiment of the opposite of what we think of the damaged dark writer myth, which I hate. I have never been a damaged dark artist, and I never will be. And I just love this opposite. And I also love, like, you're a mom, you're super active in your community. You're like, you're a very healthy, well-rounded person. And, is this something that, did you ever feel like you had to kind of work against that stereotype? Did you ever question this idea of, like, am I a real artist? Or like, and like, what was it that that made you go, like, yes. And if not, if it like, if this is always kind of, been how you are, how do you think that these other aspects of your life, contribute to your identity as a writer? Like, I think we need to change this conversation about, like, the idea that artists are like loner, like dysfunctional people, and that, like, artists can just be as normal as anyone else. Like, we're allowed to, like, have full and happy and healthy lives. Just because we like to do this job does not mean that we have to, like, live this lifestyle. Like, I don't know. That's just like my own little thing. But you strike me as somebody who is kind of that embodiment of that healthy artist.
Well, thank you very much. I'm amused that you find me normal, because I feel anything but most of the time.
When I say normal, I mean, we're all weird, but, like, you know what I mean?
Well, and I don't want anyone to think that I have this, like, everything's in control kind of life.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all trying to figure it out every day.
Yep.
I don't know if I've ever felt that I'm fighting against a brooding, dark, troubled writer identity. I've never had, like, to me, that's never occurred to me.
Yep.
But what I do find I fight against is when I tell people the kind of books that I write, that look on their face like, oh, you're right.
Oh, you don't write real books.
Right. And then you just kind of want to punch them in the face. which goes against the I'm a delightful human being thing that I try to project. So I can't do that. But that to me is when people are dismissive of writing romance or writing women's fiction or writing beach reads, or chick lit, going back to the lit chick, which I love, by the way.
Thank you.
So that to me is the biggest struggle that I encounter, is when people feel like, oh, you write books with happy endings, so those aren't important. And you write books about women, so those aren't important. And you write books about women who have problems that are very female centric, so those are especially not important books. Yep. Those are all things that I feel like I'm fighting against. And I mean, you've been in the industry and you see the books that get covered. It drives me nuts when you see these beach read lists and they're full of literary fiction. Who's the, pardon my language, asshole who's reading literary
I have to be honest, every beach read I've read that's literary fiction, I have been highly disappointed in. Like, I'm like, this isn't what I wanted to read at the beach. Like, I'm waiting for it to get fun. And like, what is this book?
You want something fast-paced and page-turnery.
Literary fiction just means there's no plot and that a man wrote it. That's like, sorry, no offense. I love my I actually like love literary fiction. Like, I have so many authors that I like. Right. I think there's this idea that it's like, that's, that literary fiction means the writing is so much better and like the construction is so much better. And that's not true. Yep. It's actually just that the style takes precedence over anything else. It takes precedence over characters. It takes precedence over plot. It's a stylized form of writing. And that's great. Like, I appreciate it for what it is, but I also love a book with really good characters and plot.
Right. I remember, like, to me, the best description of literary versus non-literary was always, when you're reading a literary book, it's not really about what's changing on the page, because nothing changes on the page. It's 400 pages of describing someone's miserable life.
Yep.
But it can affect you. It makes you think about your life and how that work reflects it and that kind of stuff. That makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yep. Whereas when you're reading more commercial fiction, it's all about the characters changing and the plot and it's less likely to stick with you in that same literary sense. So people think it's less because it's less thinky, but trust me, there's lots of problems with Nathaniel Hawthorne, but I believe he's the guy who said, easy reading is damn hard writing. And he's right.
Oh, that is like the quote. But that's the thing, right? Like, if you're in the mood for kind of like a contemplative, introspective thing, then like maybe a sort of, philosophical literary book is like what you're in the mood for. But if you're in the mood to kind of like zone out and escape, but not even zone out, like just to like live, I always feel like it's like, what do I want to try on someone else's life for a little while? Like, that's what to me it's about. And that you and I are like,
yes,
we're right on the same page.
Spirits.
I love it. We are kindred spirits. We need to start a supper club. I love it. I'm so into this. We are like already, we're edging on our time, but I want to just real quick, what are you working on right now?
So I'm not going to say, it's funny. I'm like, I'm not going to say much about it. And then each time I talk about it, I say a little bit more. So what I'm working on right now is a Christmas story. So it'll be set at the Milwaukee Christmas market.
Awesome.
And there's going to be, it's kind of like Brigadoon meets the Milwaukee Christmas market.
Brigadoon, I love it.
With
Brigawalkie.
Yes. With Kringle, which is a Danish pastry that is very common in Wisconsin. Yeah. So that's the food element. Place is Milwaukee, and then Brigadoon, if you're familiar with that story.
Yep.
It has a strong magical element.
Cool.
Super excited about it.
So is the magic here to stay?
I
think so.
Mostly might be.
Cool. I'm into that.
I mean, I definitely probably contemporary setting.
Yeah.
Just a little
like, it's the alternate world reality. God, and I have so many questions for, I'm like, I wanted to talk about like how you decide the rules for the magic and all of that stuff, but we'll have to do that next time, because I know, like, I don't want to take up too much of your time. You have been so generous with it already. I do want to just encourage everyone to go out and purchase the Kindred Spirits Supper Club, preferably from a local bookstore. Do you want to give a shout out to any local bookstores?
My local bookstore is Books and Company in Oconomowoc. If you go to my website, amyreichert.com, there is a link on that page that will bring you to their, they might even still have it at 10% off. And unless they've sold out of this signed stock, you might get a signed book.
I love it. And one last question. I'm sorry, because I just want to bring it up, even though we're like at the tail end, but Tall Poppies.
Yes.
I mean, you're also so invested in amplifying female voices. Can you talk a little bit about Tall Poppies and, you know, what you guys do and why it's so important to you?
So the Tall Poppies is a group of women writers. We're a marketing co-op. So we work together to not only help promote each other's books,
I love it,
but to just lift women voices in general.
I love it.
We have our big storefront, so to speak, is our Facebook group Bloom, which you can join at areyouinbloom.com.
Yep.
But we just like to celebrate female voices in literature. And I mean, there occasionally a guy will sneak in. We're not completely opposed. But the idea is by lifting the whole Tall Poppy idea came from this old story about way back in the poppy fields. If one poppy grew up too tall, they would chop it off.
Mm-hmm.
But if you let them all grow together, they can all be taller. So that is the idea, that if we grow together, we will all be taller in the end, versus just the couple that pop up and then ultimately get lapped off because they're all out there by themselves. So that is the idea, to lift all female voices.
Awesome. Everybody follow Tall Poppies. Obviously follow Amy on all her social channels, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Pick up the Kindred Spirits Supper Club. It's so much fun. And I can't wait until I can come and visit Milwaukee again. And, you know, and I want to visit the Dells now. I need to it just sounds so cool.
When your little gets bigger, it is the perfect place to take them.
It sounds
give you all the scoop.
I love it. I love it. Amy, you are so wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you to Julia Evers, who's behind the scenes helping us out today, and Rachel Levy-Lesser and Julia Gerstenblatt, who helped us on the front end, and Alex Hoop, who helped us with promo and everything. We love you from here on A Mighty Blaze. Next week, I believe we have Mary Kay Andrews on to talk about her new book, which is fun. And we're here every Friday at noon. Amy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jenna.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.